Thank you and welcome to the show this morning. The topic this morning is Egypt and the Muslim Brotherhood. And we're fortunate to have with us to talk about Egypt and the Muslim Brotherhood our resident African expert, Dr. LMadu. And of course, Dr. LMadu needs no introduction to any of our audience because he's been with us on many, many occasions, and he's also with us at the beginning of this new season. And Dr. Madu, let me welcome you to the show this morning and to tell you how delighted we are to again have you with us to talk about one of the real issues in international politics today, and that is the situation in Egypt. And the topic I think we've selected is Egypt and the Muslim Brotherhood. And so let's have you to start off that topic for us this morning.
Well, you know, the Muslim Brotherhood has been at the center of Egyptian politics for the past 80 years. You know, most people in the Arab world and in the entire Middle East know about the Muslim Brotherhood. However, you know, with the ascension to power of Mohammed Morsi, who is a member of the Brotherhood, the organization has come, you know, into more scrutiny. People want to know who are they, what are they up to, where was it started, do they have branches in the United States or other parts of Europe, you know, etc., etc. But it's an organization that was founded in 1928 in the Egyptian city of Ismailia by a man, a Muslim cleric, an intellectual called Hassan el-Banna. You should know that in the 20s, the Arab world and the entire Middle East was going through a political and religious convulsion. By that I mean after the end of the First World War and the abolition of the Caliph in Turkey by Ataturk, the whole Islamic world was in disarray and trying to find its way. Egypt was no exception. After that war, there was a lot of economic and political changes that were needed. You know, secularization was coming in, westernization was coming in, modernization was coming in. Most of these things were anathema to the Muslims. And Hassan el-Banna and his followers saw it that way. They were opposed to a secular Egypt. They were opposed to a westernized Egypt. They were opposed to a modernized Egypt because they felt that the influx of Western influences would dislocate Egyptian society, not only economically, but also spiritually. So they started trying to find solutions to some of these problems. Egypt at that time was under the leadership of King Farouk, and Farouk's court was known to be very corrupt. So el-Banna was railing against corruption in Farouk's court, while he was railing against secularization and westernization, because he felt that westernization and secularization and modernization of Egyptian society will bring in what they call the twin evils of industrialization and capitalism, which he felt Egyptians did not need. So el-Banna articulated a set of guidelines of what he believes his organization would do. He wants a return of the Caliph, the institution of a theocratic one-party state in Egypt, you know, and also the Egypt should be ruled according to laws of the Quran. To execute some of these ideas, he started, building a mass organization, through building healthcare centers, schools, feeding the poor, YMCAs. His own was called Young Men's Muslim Association, YMMA. That's correct. He formed all those things in order to get into the grassroots of the whole country. So by the time you know it, the whole of Egypt had cells of Muslim brotherhoods. And the more he built schools and hospitals and centers, the more people flocked to him, the poor people and all this, So his organization was growing so fast that by the 1930s, early middle 1930s, had about 500,000 followers, which was very outstanding in Egypt at that time. So he started transforming his organization from a religious organization to a political organization. The Muslim Brotherhood was formed as a religious organization, anti-Western organization. So in the early 1930s, he started getting into the political arena, started opposing the French and the British influence in the Middle East. Once the return of the Suez Canal, started opposing the king and criticizing the king, So there inevitably had to be a coalition.
Okay, Dr. Madu, let's have this first commercial break, and then I think we'll get back into the same area that we're in now. And let us stop for this commercial break, and we'll be back with you following this very, very short commercial break. Thank you and welcome back to the second segment of the show for today. We're talking to Dr. LMadu, and he's given us some information in reference to the organization of the Muslim Brotherhood, as well as additional information dealing with this spiritual political organization, Dr. Madu, I think we might say. Why don't you go on and pick up at that point, Dr. Madu?
Like I said, in the mid-1930s to late-1930s, his organization that was originally founded, as a religious organization to oppose, Western influence in the Middle East, gradually started taking a political face. He started opposing French and British colonial rule in the Middle East. Once he returned to the Suez Canal, to Egypt, and also started criticizing and opposing King Farouk and his court, which he believed was corrupt. Inevitably, there has to be a conflict with the authorities. The authorities were getting scared and frightened about Banner's growing power with the masses, because everything he was saying was what the majority of Egyptians wanted, for themselves. So that was threatened to the court. So in 1948, the organization was banned, by the government of Egypt. Its assets impounded, and a lot of its, members arrested. However, that same year, a Muslim Brotherhood member assassinated the Prime Minister, Mamdouh Pasha, in 1948. Well, in 1949, most people regard it as a retaliation. Banner himself was assassinated in February, 1949. After he was assassinated, his second in command, so-called, a man called Sayyid Qutb, took over. When Qutb took over, the organization became more radical. Qutb was also an Islamic scholar and intellectual. In fact, he was the godfather of Osama bin Laden and his current, Ayman al-Zawahiri. All of them grew under his tutelage. So he became the spiritual guide of the Brotherhood. So it didn't take time for 1952 to come around. The Egyptian free officers overthrew King Farouk, and Abdul Nasser came to power. When Nasser came to power, the Brotherhood, they wanted to come out and say, hey, Nasser, we support you, you and the officers. So Nasser welcomed them back. Remember, they were banned in 48. So Nasser welcomed them back, and Nasser was talking with Qutb all the time, seeking his advice. But in 1954, a Brotherhood member wanted to assassinate Nasser. But they fired some shots at him at a meeting. So Nasser got mad, banned the organization, arrested all its members. In 1966, Qutb was executed, after he was tried and accused of attempting to assassinate Abdul Nasser. That was in 66. So he stayed banned until Anwar Sadat came to power in 1971. When Sadat came to power in 71, he started releasing people, from jail and cracked down on a lot of the activities of Egyptian secret police. So he unbanned the Brotherhood in a way and brought them back into spheres of political life halfway. However, in 1981, Sadat was assassinated by members of the Muslim Brotherhood. Even though they went by the name of Islamic Jihad, But the guy who fired the shot that killed Sadat, Lieutenant Ahmed Islambuli, is a member of the Egyptian army, but he was a secret member of the Brotherhood. Mohammed Zumor, who was the brainchild of the plan to kill Sadat, was also a member, secret member of the Brotherhood Egyptian army. Zawahiri, who is now head of the Al-Qaeda, was a member of that group too, Islamic Jihad. So after Sadat's assassination, Mubarak took over. And Mubarak cracked down on them, executed those that needed to be executed, threw others in jail, including Zawahiri, the current head of Al-Qaeda. So they stayed, they went underground as usual when Mubarak cracked down. So in 82, the big rebellion in Hama, Syria happened. A branch of the Muslim Brotherhood in Hama rebelled against President Assad of Syria. Assad sent his brother, Rifat al-Assad, who was the commander of the elite unit, to go down to Hama and put the rebellion down. In a matter of weeks, 10,000 people were slaughtered by the Syrian army, and the rebellion was put down. So since then, the Brotherhood has been quiet. Then after the overthrow of Mubarak, they brought their head up again as the Egyptian Freedom and Justice Party. That was under the umbrella which Morsi ran for election. So Morsi ran for election last year and won as a member of the Brotherhood. Now the problem is, how is Morsi going to govern? Since he came to power, he has been issuing some decrees and trying to accumulate powers himself, trying to circumvent the justice system and all that. So people are getting very, very angry in Egypt. A lot of the Christians are running away now, immigrating to the United States and to Europe. Women are scared. They might have to become second class again after years of, being
liberation.
Exactly. So all those things are getting people mad. Now, the United States itself has a off-hands approach. In fact, last year President Obama said, look, Egypt is not our friend, they're not our enemy. Even though they receive about $3 billion from us every year. Yeah, because he's not sure which way the wind is going to blow with Mohamed Morsi. Now, one of the key tenets of Hassan al-Banna's, was the installation of a one-party theocratic state in Egypt, governed by the laws of the Quran. Morsi is a strong supporter and believer of Hassan al-Banna. So people are beginning to say, well, Morsi might eventually, gradually bring in a theocratic state into Egypt.
Is that the center of most of his opposition in Egypt? Many people oppose him, and that's why they oppose the Egyptian Brotherhood in a real sense?
Absolutely, because they are scared they are going to introduce a theocratic state, and that would be the end of free and fair elections. In Iran since '79, if you don't belong to the party of the mullahs, you are frozen. So they feel that is going to happen in Egypt, that Morsi is going to eventually introduce a theocratic state in Egypt. So that's creating a whole lot of problems. And that's the crux of the whole Muslim Brotherhood philosophy. It's a rule by the Quran and by God. And most Egyptians, at least half Egyptians, are opposed to that kind of government. That's the importance of the Brotherhood today in the politics of the Middle East.
Very good. And of course, let us take this final commercial break, and we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. Thank you and welcome back to the final segment of the show for today. We're talking to Dr. LMadu, and the topic is Egypt and the Muslim Brotherhood. And of course, Dr. LMadu has given us quite a bit of information concerning the history of the Muslim Brotherhood and the impact of this organization even today. Go on, Dr. LMadu. Let's see if we can pick up at that point.
Yeah, and the major fear of a lot of the Arab countries, in the Middle East, is that the infection of Brotherhood rule in Egypt is going to affect them. For example, in Sudan, they go by a different name, the National Islamic Front, led by Ali Hassan Turabi. That was the man who instigated President Bashir to introduce Islamic, rule in Sudan that started all these problems. This is part of it. Then in Tunisia, they're called the Renaissance Party under Mr. Ghanouchi. The Hamas in Gaza, they're part of the Muslim Brotherhood. In Iraq, they're called the Islamic Iraqi Party. So in different countries, they go by different names, but they're all tentacles of the Brotherhood. So what is going on in Egypt now is very significant insofar as the Sunni Muslim countries are concerned. Now, understand, I say Sunni. It has a very big relevance here. The Muslim Brotherhood is a Sunni revivalist organization. Now, it doesn't have much influence in Shiite-dominated countries. And when Muhammad started his religion, after he died, there became two factions, the Sunnis and the Shiites. Now, the Brotherhood is a Sunni organization. So its influence is very minimal in countries like Iran,
Lebanon. Well, there's not a large Sunni.
Exactly. Lebanon, Bahrain, and Azerbaijan. These countries are Shiite-dominated countries. So the Brotherhood doesn't have much influence there. But in countries like Indonesia, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Russia, India. In fact, India has more Muslims than the whole Arab world put together. Turkey and all these places. They are afraid of what will follow if Morsi and the Brotherhood in Egypt succeed in imposing a theocratic dictatorship. And that is worrying to the United States and also to Israel. Even though Morsi had made a commitment to respect the Camp David Accords and other international agreements, still the U.S. is wary of what will happen.
The very influence and the very number in terms of the members of the Brotherhood would tend to indicate, in terms of these two religious factions, do you think that the Brotherhood has more members than any other faction? Because I think you've given us more names in terms of countries that are involved in that.
Yeah, the Brotherhood definitely, have more members than any other Islamic organization that we know of, because they are all in these countries. I mean, in Egypt itself is the best organized political party, say so in Egypt, even though it calls itself a religious organization. But remember that also the political front is the Peace and Justice party, under which Freedom and Justice Party, under which Morsi came to power. So now they have their own political wing as well as the religious wing. But both of them are the same. One feeds off the other. So it's very significant because Egypt is really the center of the Arab world.
That's what I was thinking. Egypt is a major player in reference to the Arab world. And how Egypt goes.
Exactly. Most of the Arab countries is the center of the Arab world. Most of what happens in the Arab world revolves around Egypt. So whatever happens in Egypt is going to affect the other ones. It's going to affect Jordan. It's going to affect the Palestinian territories. It's going to affect Kuwait. It's going to affect Syria. So that's very important. And Syria now is going through, a big crisis. And it's very significant because even the Egyptian government is supporting the opposition in Syria because of this Sunni Shiite thing we're talking about. Remember I said the Brotherhood is a Sunni organization. Yeah, and those rebels in Syria are Sunnis, 80% of them. And the government of Syria is run by a Shiite government. They are called the Alawites.
With a small
minority. Yeah, 10% of the population. The Alawites. And the Alawites and the Shiites are the same. And that's why Iran is supporting Syria. Because those Alawites and the Shiites in Iran have blood relations, you see. But Egypt and Saudi Arabia, because of being Sunni, are supporters of the rebels who are 90% Sunni in Syria. So that is significant, because if the Sunnis win in Syria, you know, it strengthens a lot of the Brotherhood power, because most of those fighting in Syria now are members of the Brotherhood. Majority, those of them who rebelled in '82 against Assad.
And so it's now the Brotherhood in a real sense against Syria, would you say that?
Indirectly, because a lot of their members, you know, are in Syria.
Now, does Egypt have enough influence to do anything in reference to what is going on in Syria, the Brotherhood?
Yeah, of course, yeah. Egypt can supply them arms, those rebels. Yeah, definitely, Israel can supply them arms and tip the balance, you know. And most Arab countries will follow if Egypt starts supporting openly that rebellion.
And you're saying that Egypt will not come out openly and support the rebels against the Syrian government, when in fact the Syrian government appears to be one of the most despotic and one of the most corrupt governments there. But they've got a small minority of the population, and they're able to. What can be done in reference to all of these power struggles, Dr. Madu, in terms of Egypt itself?
Well, the Egyptian situation, you know, right now, it has to play out itself. We have a lot of economic and strategic interests in Egypt that we don't want to upset the status quo or the apple cart, like they say. And Israel the same. You know, while Israel is scared of an Islamic government, but Israel prefers stability. You know, whomever is in power, as far as Egypt is stable and they don't have refugees flowing across, you know, Israel will be fine. So these are the two main concerns, because if there's a problem in Egypt now, a whole lot of refugees will be run across the border into Gaza, into Palestinian territories. And that creates more pressure on the Palestinian government in terms of refugees and all this, and more explosion. So it's in the interest of Israel for Egypt to remain peaceful and calm, even in Syria. That's why Israel is keeping quiet in Syria too. You know, Assad, even though he's been brutal, he also has maintained stability. You know, didn't bother Israel at this border.
And so that's the most important concern with Egypt, that the governments around it remain stable governments and able to defend themselves for themselves, as well as, in a real sense, by defending for themselves, they're able to protect Israel. Is that what we're saying?
That's correct. If there's stability, you know, in those places, then Israel won't have to worry about cross-border attacks, you know. Yeah, so that's very important. That's why Israel is keeping a neutral stance in what's happening in Syria. Because whomever wins in Syria really wouldn't be the best friend of Israel. But Israel would rather have somebody keep an eye on the country, that refugees are not running across. Because now there are over 100,000 refugees already run over to Lebanon. When it was the other way around, before, you remember the Lebanese civil war, they were running to Syria. Now you have over 100,000 Syrian refugees in Lebanon. Now what happens? Some of those refugees will start drifting close to the Israeli border. And then most of them, when they get there, they get hungry and mad and all this. Then they start carrying guns and Molotov cocktails to throw over into Egypt.
And so that, I mean,
exactly,
Israel.
Yeah.
And that's not in the interests of the Israelis.
Exactly. So they would rather have a stable government. So right now they are working with Morsi, since he has committed to keep that peace treaty. And when Hamas and Israel were in conflict a few months ago, you know, Morsi used his power as president of Egypt to influence the outcome, to tell Hamas to calm it down, and so they can.
So it's in the best interest of the United States as well as Israel that Egypt is successful in terms of, in spite of the fact that Egypt can also reach out to other countries in reference to its brotherhood connection. Is that right?
Absolutely. And even at that,
we're going to have to end this. And of course, we'll be back with our audience next week for another informative edition of Comments. Thank you and good morning.